Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. And now let's join today's host, Mann.
Someone once wrote, "When God thought of mother, he must have laughed with satisfaction and framed it quickly. So rich, so deep, so divine, so full of soul, power, and beauty was the conception." Now, while that sentiment reflects the ideal of motherhood, sometimes reality can be, well, let's just say a little bit more realistic. If you are like most parents, good parenting skills don't come easily. Of course, the challenges of being a mom as opposed to a dad are quite unique. There are so many expectations to live up to, goals to meet, and hugs to give out that, well, sometimes motherhood can be a little overwhelming. So to help you ladies out there who want to improve your mommy skills, today's show is called Motherhood 101, How to Be a Better Mom. Of course, what do I know? I'm just a dopey dad, so we do have a few people here that do know what they're talking about and can help us through this challenging topic. First of all, Sabine Vatel.
Hi, Rick.
As my co-host. You're not a mommy, not yet.
I'm not a mommy.
But you're here to help maybe give us some insight or some good questions.
Sure.
As we learn along the way together.
That's right.
Also joining us is Barbara McCoy, who is the pastor of children's and women's ministry at the Forest Lake Seventh-day Adventist Church and a mother of one.
That's right, a 16-year-old.
16-year-old, yeah, and she's getting older, of course. And Gregg, Cain, who's a counselor and high school chaplain and a contributing editor for Hope on Fire and a father of two.
Dopey dad number two.
Dopey dad number two, that's right, yeah. It's kind of, on a motherhood, it was kind of interesting. I was like, okay, I'm going to have another dad on the show, but with all your counseling background and your family background, I would love to have your insight as well. So
I just want to make sure they get it right.
That's right.
Thank you, Greg.
That's what dads are for. That's right, yeah. Well, this is really a follow-up show to a show that Greg and I did last season called Fatherhood 101, and I didn't want the moms to feel left out. So that's why we're doing the show. And it was a great show.
Yeah.
And, just like that show, let me throw this question out to you, Barb. Why is being a good mom so important? Why is that such a thing to aspire to?
Well, Rick, as I look at my own life, there's a lot of things I can do over again in my life, or gain more. I can gain more property if I want. I can get another job if I want. I can go and get another education if I want. But once I choose to be a mother, I have that one time to do it. Mm-hmm. And now looking at my daughter, 16, I realize how quickly time goes. And so if you're going to be a mom, choose to be a good mom as best you possibly can and look for the resources that can help you to do that, to be the best mom you possibly can be.
Gotcha. Like download this show and put it on your iPod.
There you
and
go.
listen to it.
There you go.
What are some of the unique things that a mom provides as a parent? Now, again, as a father, I kind of have that perspective. As a mom, I'm obviously completely lost. I just don't have the wiring for it. Mm-hmm. But what does a mom bring that's unique as a parent versus, say, a dad or just being a parent?
Well, I think most of the time a mom brings a nurturing aspect. Not that dad doesn't nurture, mm-hmm. but I think generally speaking, you see a mom being the nurturer. I think also mothers can be a little bit more in the comforting area.
Okay.
A dad many times can say, "Get over it, kid. Get up and go." Where mom
shake
will
it
be,
off.
"Yeah, shake
Right.
it off. Just move on."
Right.
And I think also moms many times seem to be in tune with their kids' needs. They might hear behind the story something that's really going on with the child. Where at least I know that's how it is in our lives. My husband many times will be laying in bed and I'll be telling him stuff and he'll be like, "Where'd you get all that? I never saw any of that."
Well, let me throw this out at you, Greg. I mean, aren't we wired differently between men and women? I mean, as much as we want to say, well, we're equal and whatever, I've seen so many times where, there is just a fundamental difference between men and women, and how can you say that's not God, working through us? I mean, that's not how God wanted it to be.
I think God has wired us up, each one, differently. We're all unique. And when he created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, I think he equipped each one to fulfill a specific function in removing each other's aloneness. And as a mother and father, and they have children, that child's going to be created in the image of God as well and have mm-hmm. physical and spiritual and emotional needs. Dads are real good at meeting physical needs. You have a job, you bring in money, you feed the kid, and, you buy them clothes, and if they fall down, you put a Band-Aid on their knee. And a lot of times we, as men, are not really wired up as much to meet the emotional needs as effectively as a mom. And I think together as a package, God can really bless those children.
That's neat. Yeah, I guess it's like in a relationship, you know, we meet each other's needs. The same thing with our kids.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Do we have any good examples of moms from the Bible, Barb? I mean, you know, when we look at the Bible, who stands out as, well, here's a good example of what motherhood is all about?
Well, I think if you asked most people, if you surveyed the Old Testament, certainly Hannah would rise as a top mom, the mother of Samuel. And you see her praying and her great desire to have a child. It was really something she wanted. She wanted a child. And then once she had that child, you see her just nurturing him for the first 3 years of his life before she decides that she's going to have him committed to the Lord for the rest of his life and be brought to the sanctuary to live with Eli. And then, of course, in the New Testament, you hear of Timothy, you know, his mother, and the one thing you learn about her is that she raised him up from an early age with the Word of God. So those are two mothers that stand out. Of course, Mary, mother of Jesus.
Right.
Who was a good mother, even though she lost Jesus.
Right.
You know, that one time she was still a good mom.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's talk about some of the easy mistakes that moms can make. You know, as young adults who might be listening or watching the show, you know, I think of people my age who might have kids anywhere between 0, you know, just born through, you know, junior high maybe. You know, what are some of the easy mistakes that moms kind of fall into? What are some of the pitfalls that they might fall into? Barb?
Well, definitely one, I think, is trying to be too much of the super mom. If you looked at it biblically speaking, Sabine, we might call her the Proverbs 31 woman.
Right, one superwoman.
Superwoman. And every woman, that seems to be this pattern that's held up to women, be the Proverbs 31 woman.
Right.
And when you read through that as a mom, okay, I got to get up early. I have to make breakfast on the table, make sure everybody's out to work and or out to school. And when they come home, I'm still sitting up. I'm mending their clothes. I'm doing this. I'm out to the door to do the jobs that need to be done and the shopping and make sure everybody's taken care of. And finally, I will get some sleep.
When I was looking through Proverbs 31, one, you know, kind of jumped out. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. It's like I see my wife in the minivan with, you know, groceries from the grocery store, lugging them in, kind of giving me a dirty look while I'm watching TV. So.
Right. Can you at least help take it out of the car?
That's right.
Word of caution, don't call her a merchant ship.
No, that's right. That's right. I said the minivan is the merchant ship. She's the captain.
Language.
That's right. That's right.
Good call.
What about you, Greg? I mean, do you think there's any pitfalls that moms maybe kind of fall into or are easy mistakes that kind of sideline them or sidetrack them a little bit?
I think in our culture today, we want the best for our children. And the generation that's being raised now, according to sociologists, they've given them a term, as they have every generation. They call them echo boomers because they are actually children from about 14 years old all the way up to early college, and they're being raised by boomers. And boomers want the best. And this is the first generation that's had car seats, and the first generation that has 20,000 airbags in a minivan. And you know, moms want kids to have the best opportunity to succeed. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I think the pressure that a mom feels for that to happen can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you have to set up very realistic expectations in trying to create a scenario for your child to do well in.
Right.
You know, and by observation, Rick, I have a lot of friends who are mothers, and I think they take on, when they fail that high expectation, they kind of beat themselves up. It seems that that's the temptation of mothers today.
Yeah, there's so much. There's so many opportunities out there. You begin to feel that your child has to experience everything. And if they're not experiencing all, that maybe you're failing them in some way. And what you begin to do is set up a scenario for your child that they're almost addicted to stimulation, that they're not used to any time alone. So I think as a mom, you have to come to the place where you were saying, Greg, you just say, okay, these 2 or 3 things I can do and I can do well. My child doesn't have to be a gymnastics specialist and a ballet specialist and a soccer specialist and a basketball specialist and an art specialist, and the list just goes on and on and on. And along with that, Rick, I think another thing is that moms tend to compare themselves to one another.
Right.
I remember when I first moved into the neighborhood we're in now, there was a little girl that was about Lauren's age, and our house was completely empty. We just had tile down on the floors, no furniture in the room, nothing. And so Lauren had this tiny little tricycle type thing, so I let her ride it around the house because there was nothing there she could hurt. And one of the moms came over, let her daughter come, and she was riding the tricycle too. And later the mom came to pick him up, and she said, you're one of those kind of mothers.
What did that mean? What did that mean?
And I sat there, I was like, okay, what does that mean? What have I done? You know, and I wanted to compare myself to her. And I think a lot of moms do that. You see another mom and you think, do I need to be like her?
Well, you know, you kind of hit on it, and we're talking about it right now, is that maybe if your mom was super mom, I mean, I think about my mom. Actually, it was my grandmother who raised me since I was 2, and I've always called her mom. You know, I look at her, and I'm like, wow. I mean, she was working. She was single. She gave me love. She gave me everything. It was, you know, unbelievable. And so maybe that might be one of the hardest expectations, I think, maybe for some women, is if they do have a super mom, they have to live up to their mother's ideal, right?
Rick, you know, I can so resonate with that because my mom also raised us by herself, and I think of what she did by herself, and it's quite intimidating sometimes to me what she was able to balance.
Now, you know, but the reverse of that, though, is what happens if your mom wasn't a very good mom? I've got a friend of mine who has said, you know, wow, one of the things I really hope I don't become is someone like my mom. And, you know, is there... You know, what happens if someone feels maybe they're not cut out to be a mom, or they've had bad role models in their life, and they just maybe don't know what a good mom looks like? How would you counsel someone like that?
I have a book.
Oh, you have a book. Okay.
It's called "Sometimes I Don't Like My Kids."
Wow. Okay.
And she actually deals with that. The author actually talks about women who don't feel that they're strong nurturers, that it's just not within them, And Rick, I think a lot of us can look back and say, okay, I didn't have certain things in my childhood from my parent, from my mother. And I think those things don't always have to be a roadblock. Sometimes they can be a learning for us. In my family, my parents had 7 children. I was 5th. And I'll tell you, by the time it got to me, my mom was done. She was spent.
Right.
And so there wasn't a lot of physical touch. There wasn't a lot of, I love you. And I realized when I got older that that was a deficit in my life. And I made a conscious decision with my daughter that that was not going to be how I raised her, that I was going to make sure that at night we laid down together and I touched her and I hugged her and I told her I loved her. So even though I wasn't raised in that and it was a deficit, it didn't have to, you know, flow over into my relationship with my daughter.
Yeah, I think about that in my own life, about being a dad. You know, it's the same thing. I didn't have a strong father figure, and I've said, you know what, that's the kind of parent I want to be, is not necessarily that he was bad or my mom was bad, but, you know, to take that as a learning opportunity, essentially, and say, okay, maybe I didn't get the hugs that I wanted, boo hoo hoo, but now I can be, you know, I can be a really good hugger, I guess, or something like that. So, Greg, do you have any insight on that as well? We have about 30 seconds.
Well, yeah, the downside to what you all were talking about is that sometimes people will use that as an excuse, and they'll fall into a victimization complex where there's, you know, well, I didn't get these, so there's no way that even if you didn't get them, you can still give them.
Right.
With God's help.
Right.
Well, that's awesome.
Good insight.
Well, we'll be continuing the discussion, obviously, here on Hope on Fire with Motherhood 101. Please join us. In just a couple minutes, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Hope on Fire. This week we are talking about Motherhood 101, learning some basics about being a better mother. Right before the break, you know, we were talking about what it takes, or maybe the challenges if we haven't had really good role models in our lives as far as being a mom. And I say we as, well, you know.
We understand, Rick.
Ladies and me as the host. What about some of the other things about that maybe women might feel about being a failure that might enter into being a mom? What are some of the aspects that, you know, women struggle with that worry about, well, I'm just not living up to the expectation? Barb?
Well, one thing, Rick, again, that I've learned in my own experience, and it wasn't the easiest thing for me to learn, was going in and being able to sit down with my daughter and say, I'm sorry. I really messed up. I don't know why I did that. I want to do a better job. And I have found that she is so incredibly forgiving. And I think most kids are.
Yeah.
So that was a lesson. And actually, my husband was probably the one that taught me that better. He was more of a person that would go in and easily say, I'm sorry. And that's something I learned that I could do with my daughter. And it really, it's amazing. I don't think there's anything a parent can do that you can't walk in and talk to a child and say, you know what, I'm really sorry.
Right. I just got it wrong. I mean, I guess that's
right.
The larger aspect there is that we're not going to be perfect, right?
Right.
As parents and as a mom, you're going to blow it. And I guess it's probably a little bit easier to have that talk when they're 6, 7, 8 years old. Maybe not so much when they're 1, 2, or 3, because they're just going to look at you and go,
what?
Well, yeah. What about, you had also mentioned as we were preparing for the show, having a loving relationship covers a lot of mistakes. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think if kids really know that you love them and that you care about them, they're going to start realizing that you really do have their best interest in mind. And, you know, you've got to help your kid understand that you truly do love them. And there's a few things, Gregg, I think you can speak to that some from your counseling background, but a few things that I've learned is having eye contact with your child, you know, being able to look them in the eye so that they're really seeing that you're talking to them and relating to them. And the other thing is a focused attention. You know, my daughter's old enough now that if I'm not listening to her, she'll say...
She can tell, right?
Yeah, she can tell. You know, are you listening to me? You know, okay, that's right. And I think focusing on a child and really taking the time to just stop whatever else is going on and just focus on them. And then, of course, another thing is physical touch. You know, being able to, when you're talking to your child, being able to just rub their arm or put your arm around them or hug them in some way. Just those are some ways that we can help them to know that we love them. And if they know that we love them and that's a relationship we've built with them, then it's a lot easier when you go and you do say you're sorry, you've messed up, because they know that you really do love them.
Now, I think the interesting thing is those three things, eye contact, focused attention, and physical contact, are all things that we can even do when the kid is 1, 2, 3 years old.
Yeah.
It carries on throughout, but you know, this is advice that we can start early on, right?
Right. In fact, if you do some of the study on women breastfeeding, one of the reasons they say that that's so valuable is because when the child is up against a mother's breast, there is eye contact and physical touch with that child. So you're already beginning to bond and build that loving relationship. And so they encourage moms, if they're not going to breastfeed, if they're going to do a bottle feed, that they still hold them in that position and feed them. Don't just put them somewhere with the bottle propped in their mouth.
Right.
Because you want that physical contact and that eye contact with them.
You feeling left out, Gregg? Because it wasn't something I was able to do.
Well, yeah, you know, I'll take your word for it, Barb.
I'm going to have to also, Barb.
Okay, all right.
Now, Gregg, you know, one of the things that I know that you've done a lot of counseling on this and a lot of training background is the intimacy needs of children. You know, how does that figure into it? She talked about some very specific things, or, you know, what are some of the things that moms can be aware of?
I think what Barb was talking about a moment ago touches on some of those intimacy or relational needs. Everybody's attachment needs are different. You know, for my son, his attachment needs are different than my daughter's. The bottom line, when they were small, one of the ways that I showed them attention, which is a healthy need. I mean, we all have a need for attention. It's okay to have that need. It's a God-ordained need. The way that need gets met is the issue. There are healthy ways to meet it and unhealthy ways.
Right.
But a child typically translates attention as a relationship. You know, dad gets down on the floor and plays with them. And that interaction is dad leaving his world and entering their world and paying attention to them, and therefore it translates to them as closeness for dad.
Right.
And the child. And moms are the very same way in terms of meeting those needs. Now, the issue for all of us, if you have a child or more than one child, is finding out what those relationship needs are and being able to meet them effectively. Because both my kids have a need for attention, but what it looks like for me to meet my need, Christy's need for attention is different than Michael's. Christy enjoys going shopping. Michael doesn't.
And Gregg does too.
Greg likes shopping.
I don't like shopping.
It's okay,
but I don't
Greg.
let my daughter know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very good.
Rick, and one thing I think Gregg was saying about knowing the difference with your kids, I found that even at church with Lauren, of course, being a pastor, there's certain expectations sometimes placed on our children. And Lauren was a very shy child. And there were times that people would come up and say, but you're outgoing and Les is outgoing. She needs to be that way. You need to make her be that way. And it was really important to me to be able to say, no, you know, it's okay for her to be who she is.
Right.
And not try to force her into another mold of who she isn't. And
What
I'm
a
glad I
good
did that,
point.
because now at 16, she's coming into her own.
Right.
And she's learning. I mean, even in that experience, I would try and explain to her, you know, Lauren, when you don't look people in the eye, sometimes here's how they feel. But I didn't want to make her feel like she couldn't be who she was, who God made her to be.
The uniqueness.
That's
Yeah.
awesome, Barbara.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, as I hear you talk, I'm like, how did she get all that wisdom?
16
to know
years
to
of being
do
a
that.
mom.
Like,
Right, now I can look back. If you'd asked me this 16 years ago, I wouldn't have
you would
known
know
anything.
that. Yeah.
And lots of
Okay.
books, too.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Lots of,
Good
Isn't that the
and
truth?
lots of sermons.
But you know, Rick, part of the guilt factor also related to this is that moms will see the importance of meeting relational needs and then they start checking, so, well, how am I doing with that? And then they think they may not be doing a good job of meeting those needs, and then the guilt sets in. And again, it's kind of impossible to meet all of your child's needs. You know, the fathers, the church. In other words, the child is in many relational communities, and it's very important for all those to function together.
Right, and as a parent, you can begin to look at what you can't provide and see if there are ways that can be provided, you know, out, like you're saying, the church.
Yeah. What about the challenges that maybe working moms face, and not necessarily single working moms, but you know, more and more, you know, married moms have to go back to work. I mean, that probably brings in a whole slew of other issues that might affect, or obviously affects, the relationship. You know, what kind of counsel
Maybe you dads would like to tell us about that.
You go, Barbara.
What are the challenges you see?
I know this. That when you're on your way home from work, and let's say it's dark, and you get behind a teen taxi or a mom taxi, and the videos are going. I've watched some of my best movies sitting at a red light through another car.
That's not comforting.
And you know, I think, you know, moms pick up kids from work, dads do as well. And there's this technology, you know, the vans have televisions in them, and the SUVs and that type of thing. And it's like, okay, I've been away from my child for so long now, and we're going to meet all their needs. You know, oh, you want a video, honey? Okay. It's like, of course they want a video. They're a kid.
Right.
But maybe that time could be spent in how was your day, conversation.
Right.
But I've watched some great movies at traffic lights.
Now, I guess the adage of it's not how much time you spend, but it's the type or the quality of time, which I think is kind of a cop-out, because I think you should spend as much time and as quality time as you can. But now, if you're working, though, you try to, like what Gregg was saying, is, you know, maybe turn the video off, and, you know, maybe if you're not sitting around the table on your way to gymnastics to drop them off, you can say, how was your day?
Right. They say keep the radio off, you know, so you can use that time, you know, as beneficial as you possibly can, and that's a conversation time, you know, you can use.
Well, let's we're starting to, you know, get towards the end of the show, and there was this one last little section that that you actually gave me as the title, Barb. Things I'm thankful that someone told me. You know, what are some things that we can have as takeaways, so young moms out there can say, you know what, I need to start planning for this, or, oh yeah, I need to, you know, keep this in the back of their head, kind of like this little list of to-dos they need to be aware of.
Well, one thing I think is to remember that this time is going to pass. You know, my daughter's 16 now, and she's got her friends, and you know that too. Your kids are that age. Your life is going to start over again. You're going to be able to go out there and do everything you ever wanted to do, because they're going to leave you. And so the time you give as a parent is not, you know, even though you may feel trapped for a period of time, it's going to end. So enjoy it while you can.
Right.
Another thing I think is make your home a place kids love to be. The kids want to be there, because I love having my daughter's friends over. And I want my home to be a place that kids want to be, and I'm glad somebody told me that. Another thing, Rick, and I wish I had done it earlier, I wish somebody told me sooner, write it down. You know, the stories, just even if you just have a little book there somewhere and they say something funny, write it down and then go back later and fill in the details.
You know, Gregg, I don't know if you're like me, I have a hard time remembering, you know, I'm like, with my little girl now, she's 1, and I'm thinking, when did Braden, my 3-year-old, my son, is like, when did he start talking? Was it 1? Was it? And all of a sudden, even as I'm still so close to when it happened, it's
amazing, isn't it?
It's starting to kind of leave me already.
Right. And there's stories that 2, 3, 4-year-olds tell you that you will never be able to replace. And so if you have them written down, you know,
it's
my daughter,
a great thing to share when they're grown up.
My daughter was running around the house one day saying, on the double, on the double. And I was like, what are you saying? She says, well, I hear that all the time. I said, you mean on the devil? And she says, yeah, that's what I mean. I wrote that down. Now we laugh about that, you know.
Right.
And, you know, it's just funny things that kids say, and write them down.
Take lots of pictures, too, maybe.
Take lots of pictures. Take lots of pictures. And another thing, too, Rick, I think that was really helpful to me is remember that I'm a parent. I'm not my child's buddy.
Right.
They've got plenty of buddies. I want to be a parent to my child.
Right.
When she's in her 20s and 30s, we're going to have a lot of time to be buddies. But right now I'm her parent, and she wants me to be her parent.
Of course, you know, that's the challenge of maybe being a mom and disciplinarian at the same time, right? Is, you know, it kind of falls into that that trap, I guess, you know, wanting to be liked and be a friend, but, you know, still being a parent.
Right.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, this has been a very interesting show for me, at least as a dad, or a dopey dad, I guess, as we were saying. And, you know, we've learned a lot. And I don't know, it's tough, I think, being a mom nowadays.
It is.
And trying to balance everything that goes on from, the challenges of looking at your kids to the relationship with your husband to work issues and being a working mom. And anyway, I just want to say thank you for you guys for helping us out here this week.
You're
It's
welcome.
really
Very
been
informative.
awesome. Washington Irving once wrote, "A mother is the truest friend we have. When trials, heavy and sudden, fall upon us, when adversity takes the place of prosperity, when friends who rejoice with us in our sunshine desert us when troubles thicken around us, still will she cling to us and endeavor by her kind precepts and counsels to dissipate the clouds of darkness and cause peace to return to our hearts." The art of motherhood isn't one that is learned overnight. Experience, patience, and humility all play a part in molding someone into a successful mother. And while the challenges never end, the payoff is well worth it. William Webb once wrote, "Mothers reflect God's loving presence on earth, and I can think of no greater responsibility or praise in the world." Thanks for joining us this week on Hope on Fire. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for joining us.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Once again, that's Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.